Hi everyone, a very pleasant good evening, good afternoon, or good morning wherever you are. Melbourne Hill here. Before I start talking about the topic for the day, please click on the subscription below, icon below, and then the notification bell. How trees produce water. We seem to know about it, but do we really know how water comes out of trees or plants for that matter? What benefits can we derive from knowing how trees produce water? In other words, why should you watch this video? We will be talking about three processes: photosynthesis, photorespiration, and cellular respiration. The second process, photorespiration, probably seems alien to you, but I'm not sure. There are two parts of photosynthesis: the light capturing and the production of carbohydrates. Now, in the electromagnetic spectrum, there is a tiny visible light, colored light from 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers. This is the light coming from the sun. That's what we are interested in photosynthesis. And the second one is, its partner is the so-called chlorophyll. Similarities of human blood and hemoglobin and plant chlorophyll are very close, except that for human blood, the center of the molecule is iron, whereas in chlorophyll, it's magnesium. So chlorophyll A absorbs all lights except green, reflects green, the same as chlorophyll B. Now, light reaction, the first step starts inside the chloroplast in the stroma, where it consists of fluids, and most of these fluids is actually water. When water is hit by the photons from the sun, it undergoes photooxidation, and you have oxygen going out as gas. That's the oxygen we breathe, including animals. But mind you, it's just 28% of the oxygen we need. The other 72% comes from other sources, which we can discuss in my next video. So aside from oxygen gas, two protons are produced and two electrons. This electrons jumps up because it's very excited and trying to charge this phosphorus compound called NADP to become NADPH. And further down the electron transfer chain, we have ADP, another phosphate compound, being charged to become ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. So this is, in summary, the photosynthesis. The NADP, or nicotinamide adenine, is converted into NADPH, and we can call this as like the battery being charged. The same with adenosine diphosphate, converted into ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. That's another battery being fully charged. Now, where do these phosphorus compounds come from? Well, if you will look at the analysis of plants, essentially composed of oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. But there's minor component, phosphorus. It's only 0.25%, but is very, very important. The great-great-grandfather of all these phosphorus compounds is called phytin, or as some others call it phytic acid or phytate or IP6. It's a phosphorus compound stored in seeds. Now, as the seeds germinate and sprout into tiny plants, in EDP, RUBP, PIP, and others gradually forming a new phosphate molecules that aid in photosynthesis. One of those, which is very important phosphorus compound, is this one. This RUBP, or ribulose 1,5-biphosphate. This acts as a policeman. It catches carbon dioxide, an inorganic compound, and converts it into an organic compound as sugar. And the process is called carbon fixation. Now, carbon fixation happens in the presence of an enzyme, or an inorganic reaction is equivalent of a catalyst. So here, carbon dioxide reacts with RUBP in the presence of Robisco to form two molecules of 3-PG or 3-phosphoglycerate. This is the look of the Robisco, the enzyme, which can act as carboxylase or oxygenase, meaning to say it can catalyze the reaction of carbon dioxide into sucrose and or the other way around, oxygen into carbon dioxide, which is called a photorespiration, which we'll talk about. Now, the synthesis part of the photosynthesis proceeds in the so-called Calvin cycle, and it is being controlled by the enzyme called Robisco. Now, there are three phases of the Calvin cycle: the carbon fixation, the reduction phase, and the regeneration phase. Now, when carbon enters the chloroplast through the stomata of the leaf, it meets RUBP, ribulose 1,5-biphosphate, the policeman. It captures this one, it fixates it to produce 3-phosphoglycerate. Now, for every 6 molecules of this phosphoglycerate, only one proceeds to finally go through the metabolic processes to become carbohydrates or sugar. The rest, the 5, are recycled back to become RUBP again, and that is at the expense of our charged battery, ATP, in NADPH, and when it is recycled, it goes back as RUBP and the reaction again with carbon dioxide. So the whole cycle is called Calvin cycle, named after the inventor Melvin Calvin. At this point, again, may I request again, those who have not subscribed yet to my channel, to click on the subscription icon below and the notification bell. If you like this video so far at this point, click on the like button also. There are three types of photosynthesis. The first one is the first one we have just discussed is the C3 type, because it is the C3 plant that produces 3 carbons of product. The C4 produces 4 carbons of product, and the CAM or crassulacean acid metabolism is a special kind of plant which is very smart. We'll talk about it later, why it is so smart. So in general, this is the C3 photosynthesis for the C3 type of plant. The inputs are water, light, and the output is oxygen and sucrose. This is the light reaction, the Calvin cycle reaction, but when certain conditions exist, instead of CO2, it is the oxygen that will react with RUBP to produce a side reaction, carbon dioxide. So the plant, instead of using or consuming carbon dioxide, now it's producing carbon dioxide in the process called photorespiration. This is a side reaction. Unfortunately, 85% of all plants in the world are C3 plants, meaning to say 85% of all plants in the world produce carbon dioxide and less oxygen and sugar. Why photorespiration happens? Number one, well, of course, air naturally has 21% oxygen and only 0.04% carbon dioxide. That's a ratio of 525:1 when they enter the stomata together. So number two, when there is more air that contains low CO2, concentration of CO2 is less than 280 ppm, it favors photorespiration. Well, this level, this is the so-called pre-industrial level way back before 1850. Number three that would favor photorespiration is when the surrounding air is warmer, the stomata tend to close its opening to avoid losing lots of water. So in doing so, the leaf inside the stroma is starved with CO2, and what's left there is oxygen. So this is how the plant stomata, it can close or it can open. So overall, the C3 plant photosynthesis and photorespiration is shown in this way. Here we have the normal Calvin cycle as we have discussed, and here we have this side reaction, this oxygen producing CO2. So it still produce some sucrose or some carbohydrates, but it's much less than when it is through here. Plus, the worst is it is producing carbon dioxide. In the study done by Wright, or RIPE, at current conditions, that is 400 ppm CO2, well, actually, as of today when we are talking about it, it's about 413 ppm. The production of carbon dioxide of plants is about 31%. That means 31% less production of carbohydrates or glucose. But with the study of the United Nations IPCC, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, when they simulated at RCP 2.6 and RCP 8.5, which corresponds to 450 ppm and 1000 ppm CO2, the loss due to photorespiration, that means the production of carbon dioxide of plants and trees due to photorespiration is reduced from 31 to 25%. Now at 1000 ppm, it much lower at 14%. So there's a drop of about 50%. Now, during dark time, respiration is the process going on because there is no sunlight, so oxygen is consumed, so carbon dioxide is released. During dim light, photosynthesis and respiration are more or less equal. So there is an equal production of CO2 and oxygen. But in bright light, sunlight, there is more production of oxygen than carbon dioxide because photosynthesis prevails and the respiration is lower in carbon dioxide production. Although cellular respiration is 24/7 and photosynthesis only about 8 to 10 hours during the time when there is sunlight. Now let's go to C4 plant. C4 photosynthesis passes through a certain temporary stage because the carbon dioxide is reacted first to PEP or phosphoenol pyruvate, another phosphorus compound, to produce oxaloacetate and malate. In a outer cell of the chloroplast called palisade mesophil. Nice name, nice term. So this is it. At here, the stomata of the leaf, CO2 enters into this so-called palisade mesophils. So CO2 meets PEP, and then produces compound called oxaloacetate and malate. Now the malate diffuses into the inner cell, which is called bundle sheath cells. There it is converted back into CO2 and PEP or pyruvate. So the CO2 in here undergoes the so-called Calvin cycle, which we have discussed earlier on C3 plants. So there is no photorespiration because it is isolated inside and oxygen cannot enter there. The third plant is CAM, or they call it crassulacean acid metabolism. This is the smartest plant. Why? It's very simple. During the night, it opens up the stomata and allows CO2 to enter to produce malate. Now, during the day when there's sunlight, this malate diffuses into this chamber to be converted back into CO2 and PEP. The PEP is recycled here back, and the CO2 undergoes again the Calvin cycle reaction, which will produce glucose. So here, when it opens up during the day, during the night, it will not lose lots of water, very few water. But during the day, it will not lose water because it closes its stomata. It closes its stomata. It only undergoes the Calvin cycle reaction. So here are the examples of these CAM plants: pineapple, cactus, well, we have Spanish moss and orchids. So this is the summary of the reaction, where photorespiration in C3 is due to side reaction with oxygen with RUBP, but skirted in C4 plants because Calvin cycle proceeds in the inner cell called bundle sheath, and in CAM plants, Calvin cycle happens when stomata are closed. So overall, in a photosynthesis, for every molecule of CO2, there are 1,000 molecules of water released through trans-evaporation. The purpose of that is to bring out it's not only for the reaction to produce glucose, but the extra water is used to carry all the nutrients from the roots up into the top of the tree. So this water is what I call the first water being produced by plants or trees. So here's the simple reaction, and the water here is the first water produced by trees. That's evaporation or evapo-transpiration. Now, let's go to the third process, cellular respiration. Actually, cellular respiration is just the opposite or the reverse of photosynthesis. So it produces water and carbon dioxide. So this water is what we call the second water being produced by plants or trees. Now, studies in 2004 have revealed that half or 50% of CO2 assimilated annually through photosynthesis is released through the atmosphere by plant cellular respiration. So plant cellular respiration is like the breathing of human beings or animals. So the carbon dioxide captured in photosynthesis, 50% of that is returned back to the atmosphere due to cellular respiration. So here's the relationship between photosynthesis and cellular respiration. And this one is more detailed, showing the Krebs cycle, the equivalent of Calvin cycle in cellular respiration. Now, leaves or plants are smart. They produce so-called VOCs of volatile organic compounds. And in the process of mixing with the atmospheric particles and other things in the atmosphere, it is converted into so-called SOA, not the bank statement of account, but this is secondary organic aerosol. Now, these are the VOCs or volatile organic compounds, which will be later converted into SOAs. If you smell pine and you pass by a pine tree, that's the responsible for that is VOC or volatile organic compounds. Now, on top of that, microbes also induce plants to produce more volatile organic compounds, and these acts as infochemicals. Like humans, in the lymphocytes, it produces T cells to act as infochemicals or infoprotein for invaders or intruders into the human body. So eventually, this secondary organic aerosol or CO is converted into CCNs or Cloud Condensation Nuclei. In my past video, I was discussing that primarily this is being produced by a so-called cosmic rays from the supernova exploding out on the universe. And in this case, this secondary organic aerosol is acting like a cosmic ray in converting water vapor from clouds into CCNs or cloud condensing nuclei. So it drops as water precipitate or rain. And this is the third form of water from trees or plants. Now, plants are also tricky. They are smart, as I said. Normally, the blue light is the only one which scatters when it reaches the vegetation. The red, the green, the blue, the other photons or types of lights do not scatter. It's only the blue. But the volatile organic compounds or the VOCs, which we just discussed, scatters light. Not only that, it goes to the process of this called May scattering and Rayleigh scattering. And then the leaves also are very smart. they try to rotate themselves in such a way at an angle that those leaves under the canopy that cannot hit directly by the sunlight will have its fair share of the sunlight for photosynthesis. So everybody happy, these leaves there is not reached by the sunlight. It can be reflected by the sunlight as some leaves rotate to give them or to feed them with sunlight. So all these drops of rain are the water vapors due to evapotranspiration, cellular respiration, and the VOCs, which were converted into rain by SOA. And that's the three sources of water that the plants or trees produce. Now you know all how trees, or all plants for that matter, smartly produce water, and that plants are not the reliable source of our gas of life, oxygen, because they only provide 28% of the oxygen needed by humans and animals to breathe and live. Furthermore, they cannot be relied to solve the so-called climate change problem because plants themselves produce carbon dioxide during photorespiration at 31% during the prevailing condition. And during cellular respiration, it's 50%. So the water that are produced by plants end up in rivers and lakes, and finally it ends up into like falls like this.